background noise of this camera that I'm got to get worked on.
Okay, I believe the ammo is live, so go ahead.
Okay, it is 7 o'clock, and we'd like to have a call to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
to the
flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And, the meeting is now called to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes, absolutely. Adriana von der Graaf,
Present.
Maggie Bird,
I'm here.
Matthew Johnston,
Present.
Robert Trimborn,
Here.
Nanette Metz will be noted as absent. James Flickinger will also be noted as absent. Gerald Abramson,
Here.
Steve Weiss,
Here.
Steve Tannehill.
Here.
Okay, you do have a quorum with 7 commissioners.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda?
Yes.
Yes. A couple hours
Okay.
worth of reading.
Pardon me?
A couple hours worth of reading.
Yeah, definitely. And we need an approval for the November minutes. Is there a motion to approve of the minutes?
I so move, Steve Weiss.
Thank you.
I
Is there a
second.
second? Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, second. Mhm.
Okay, let's go on to public comment period.
I think we need to have a vote, don't we, on the minutes?
Okay, well, we can vote on it. Thank you. All in favor?
I
Aye.
Any opposed?
abstain.
Thank you. Let's move on to public comment period. Comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes per item. The public comment period is reserved for issues not on the agenda. If you wish to make a public comment on the agenda item 5, please raise the hand button, or if you're calling in, press star then 9 to be added to the speaker queue when prompted by the chair of the commission. Are there any comments at this point from the public?
Chair, we do have 2 hands raised. That's Mr. Mark Sweeney and Mr. Ben D. Benedetto. We'll go ahead and promote Mark Sweeney at this time.
Thank you. Let's go ahead, please. Thank you, Mark. Mark?
And Mr. Sweeney, if you'd like to unmute, share your screen if you'd like, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin speaking.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, just a few items. I'd like to congratulate the Department of Airports and the local aviation activities for a very successful Youth Day, Discovery Day in December. I noticed there's some information on that in the packet, and I think it was amazing that despite the weather at the time, that about 40 some children got to experience the thrill of flight or the joy of flight, and a lot of parents and people that don't know much about the airport got to see some of the things that can happen at the airport. Along with that, I've been kind of talking to people around the area about the airport. If you look at Camarillo Airport, there are so many events that happen there, including the huge event, the Wings Over Camarillo, but there's very little happening. I know that the intent is to try and do a few more of these types of events there, but the hard part, and over to you folks to think about this, is that there's not even a real good viewing area that visitors can come and even look over the fence line to see aircraft operations or get involved with that. One of the most popular things at Camarillo Airport is the restaurant. Obviously, there was in years past, there's been a restaurant at Oxnard. And it was, I think it was well attended. I don't know why. I was out of the area when it closed, and I was really disappointed to move back here and find that it was gone. But I think with the happenings with Aero Computers, that might open that space up again. And I really think it, just to get people involved from the local community and things that are happening at the airport, that's very important to do. And number three, besides being an aircraft owner at Oxnard Airport and have flown, used to keep an airplane at Camarillo Airport also, I would like to mention that, and I live in Oxnard Shores, just south of Woolley, where a lot of the people that complain about the airport claim to be living, and I don't have any problems with that. But the most interesting thing was the Nextdoor app. Somebody put in a comment that we ought to petition to close the airport. It just for the first few days, a lot of piling on from the airport haters, it seemed like. But I was just amazed that for weeks after that, how many of the public around that are on Nextdoor, Oxnard Shores or wherever, were very positive about the airport and basically telling the others, just go away. You knew about the airport so long. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have our next public member, please.
Okay, we will go ahead and promote Mr. Ben D. Benedetto. And once you join us, you can unmute and share your screen if you like, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin speaking.
Okay. There we are. All right. Sorry about the framing on this thing. I'll start out on a positive note. I'd like to congratulate Director Freitas and the airport staff on the acquisition of the new truck for safety operations at Oxnard Airport. There had been a budget line item approved at over $1 million for that said vehicle. And we asked that that money not be spent, and Director Freitas and the staff were able to get a truck donated, I believe from Van Nuys, either Van Nuys or Burbank, not sure which, but very nice move. Operations continue at the airport. We want them to be safe and sane. And so save the taxpayers some money, and that's a good thing. One other thing, that we did have some really oppressive traffic over Oxnard Shores again the last couple of days after New Year's here. And one issue that really bothered me was that the traffic was directed over Oxnard Shores, according to the airport staff person handling the complaints and situations, on one day that was particularly bad because there was an aircraft that was doing touch and goes for quite a while that had no radio contact with the tower. And I understand we're going to have traffic and there are going to be issues that come up, and sometimes you're going to have more traffic over one area or another because of an issue that comes up. But the issue for me to have an airline or an aircraft continuing to do touch and goes over a neighborhood with no ability to contact the tower or the tower to contact them is unsafe. And I don't know what the protocol is about getting a plane out of the rotation on a touch and go pattern that you can't communicate with, but I think that needs to be looked at. So that's the end of my comment. I'll yield back the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. D. Benedetto. Are there any other members of the public with comments?
Yes, we have promoted Barb Filkins. If you can unmute, share your screen if you'd like, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, I just wanted to make a few comments, and I thank you, Mark Sweeney, for following up. But I want to just say a few words about the December 10th day of discovery at Oxnard Airport. And I apologize, I'm not going to go on video because I may be losing internet. I'm in kind of a flood zone out here in Fillmore with the Sesame Creek. Anyway, Director Freitas will have more detail when he gets to his director's report. But just a little bit of background. The whole event kind of started innocently enough, and I kind of played a fairly major role in it. I had stopped to talk to Keith. I can't remember exactly what month, but we discussed an outreach event at Oxnard and using the EAA Young Eagles program, maybe sometime in 2023. And I think I'm the one who said, why wait? What about December? And we kind of looked at available weekends, and then it was basically off to the races for me. Given the envisioned scope we came up with, there were some skeptics, but I've kind of learned from my background that sometimes wild ideas mean wild rides. And I had a pretty wild ride from mid-September to mid-December that turned out successful. But there are also solid reasons why I figured this would be successful. The first is aviation. For most of us involved in the industry, and it doesn't matter whether we're pilots or something else, is a passion that we want to share. And close to that is the desire to reach out to make it real for those who don't realize that it's within their reach. The bottom line is someone needs to discover what is out there before they can chase their dream. And this resonated with the school districts that we talked with, as well as the individuals that participated in the event. Second of all, aviation is a community. If you throw us a challenge, most of us tend to pull together. And this event had every aviation organization in the county playing together, plus a few others, school systems, individuals that believe in the kids, so forth and so on. I think what really drove it, though, was the threat of an asset being lost. This airport is not just about a place to practice for a rating or to store an airplane. The benefits Oxnard Airport can offer don't just end with pilots. With vision and planning, the airport has the capability to lead to future opportunities. I think I've said this before, hopes and dreams for the local communities and the county at large. I can remember one pivotal moment before the start of this whole thing. A parent who called me a week before the event said, with tears in her voice, this was the first time that something had come along which pulled her son away from the depression he had been in since the pandemic started and actually made him want to engage in life. So as we move forward, being good neighbors with noise and environmental concerns and safety,
30 seconds,
I
please.
think it needs to be kept in mind. End of comment.
Thank you, Barb. Are there any other comments?
Don't have any members of the public with a raised hand, but we did receive 4 written public comments that I can go ahead and read into the record. The first comment, thank you. The first comment is from Joni Conterno. It reads, regarding flight school touch and go training out of Oxnard Airport, there has been some reduction in the frequency of flights directly over Oxnard shores. The efforts to, quote, educate, unquote, flight schools to voluntarily comply with the fly-friendly pattern is admirable, but does not seem to be sustainable, as many local flight schools continue to violate the VNAP. The list of violations following the September 13th, 2022 fly-friendly forum is considerable, and we have been patient, as requested by the airport, to allow the, quote, educational period, unquote, to run until the end of the 4th quarter to be followed by accountability. We are now in Q1 of a new year, and there are days of repeated invasive touch and go flights violating the VNAP. One example, January 2, in the middle of the day, Camarillo flight instruction, open paren, attendees of the Fly Friendly Forum, close paren, had 3 planes in the air at the same time, all reported for flying repeated touch and go training patterns in violation of the VNAP. Like nothing has changed. It is time for accountability to become what education has not been able to fully accomplish. Please provide details on the VNAP accountability proposed to ensure the success of VC Fly Friendly and to protect the safety and well-being of our communities around Oxnard Airport. End of comment from Joni Conterno. The next comment is from Rita Weingarten. It reads, good evening. My name is Rita Weingarten, and I am a resident of the Oxnard Shores neighborhood. Last week was an awful week for noise and traffic flying directly over our homes, with Monday, January 2nd and Saturday, January 7th being 2 of the worst days. We were informed that part of the reason for the increased, quote, left, unquote, traffic was due to a plane doing right turn touch and goes while having no radio communication. Why on earth would the tower allow a plane with 0 radio communication to continue to do touch and goes? This seems like a very dangerous situation, and it led to a horrible increase in left turn traffic over our homes. I am still miffed by the number of fly-friendly violators who continue to, quote, cut the corner at 5th Street and who choose to fly directly over Oxnard shores rather than proceed out over the ocean a half mile before turning or turning before the canal. It seems to be the same flight schools, including a few local ones, that are not following the recommended pattern and consistently fly, quote, unfriendly, unquote. I understand that the Oxnard Airport is now shifting to the accountability phase, and I look forward to hearing more specifics on what is going to be done to the schools and pilots who continue to ignore and violate the Fly Friendly program. Thank you. End of comment from Rita Weingarten. The next comment is from Nanette Meister. It reads, "Good evening and thank you for your interest in our neighborhood, quality of life. I have noticed days of excessive air traffic over our home located at Coral Way in Oxnard, 93035. This area is known locally as the Shores. We are west of Harbor, south of Woolley, and close to Neptune Beach Park. Our main issue is the nonstop small planes just circling overhead. The noise is excessive and never ending." End of comment from Nanette Meister. The next comment is from Susan Tatum. It reads, "Over the past 3 months, the residents of Oxnard Shores and other neighborhoods have been patient while Director Freitas and his team implement the education phase of the plan to bring safety and peace back to our neighborhoods. While the disruption to our lives has improved on some days, others are still as bad as ever. Making slight improvements to hell does not turn it into heaven. We were promised that after 3 months of education, the airport would move into the accountability phase. Those 3 months are over. The Oxnard communities deserve to hear specifics about how these fly-friendly abusers are being held accountable. Thank you." End of comment from Susan Tatum, Oxnard resident. And that concludes the written comments that were received. And we have no further hands raised at this time.
Okay, no further comments, no hands raised at this time. Thank you. Can we move on to number 6, new business? Okay, with new business, item A is consider adoption of Resolution 17, authorizing remote teleconference meetings of the Aviation Advisory Commission pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision E of the Ralph M. Brown Act.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, and may I clarify the seconder of the motion? I have Mr. Johnson as the who made the motion.
I'm sorry, Bob Trimborn seconded that.
Thank you so much. For roll call, Adriana Vondergraff,
Approved.
Maggie Bird,
Approve.
Matthew Johnston,
Approve.
Robert Trimborn,
Yes.
Gerald Abramson,
Yes.
Steve Weiss,
Aye.
Steve Tannehill.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously 7-0.
Thank you. Item 6B, subject is receive and file a presentation from Kaufman Associates regarding the airport layout plan update and Part 150 noise compatibility study for Camarillo Airport and the Part 150 noise compatibility study for Oxnard Airport. Dave, are you going to want to make some comments?
Madam Chair, this is Keith. I will.
Oh, hi, Keith. I
I
didn't
will-
realize you were there.
No problem. I'll do the opening. I'm going to hand it off to their point person, Matt Quick. But
Thank
by
you.
way of a little bit of background, these are the 3 planning projects we've got. Again, Part 150 noise compatibility studies for both Oxnard and Camarillo airports individually. And then we have the change that we originally had was the airport master plan for Camarillo that was changed to an airport layout plan narrative study. So Matt, if you will take it off and introduce your team.
Thank you, Keith. And good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Airport Commission. Again, my name is Matt Quick with Kaufman Associates, and it's a pleasure to be able to take part in this evening's meeting to provide you guys an update on these projects and where we're at right now and where we're going to be going. I'm just going to spend a couple moments at the outset here before I turn it over to Patrick Taylor and Corey Lewis. But let me just take a moment to introduce the project team who is present at the meeting here this evening. Again, my name is Matt Quick with Kaufman Associates, and with me is Patrick Taylor, Corey Lewis, and Maddie Holloman. And we represent Kaufman Associates, who's an airport planning and consulting company. We specialize in a variety of airport planning projects, environmental documentation, and noise and land use compatibility studies. We've been fortunate to come alongside the Ventura County Department of Airports over the last several years and take part in several different types of planning projects. So we're supported by several folks within our organization that deal specifically with aviation and airport planning. We have a variety of planning and environmental specialists on our team. We have CAD technicians, GIS analysts, graphic designers, and all those individuals are going to be taking part in this particular study process, and in particular, the three projects that Keith had mentioned with the Camarillo Airport Layout Plan Update, and then the Part 150 noise compatibility studies for the Camarillo Airport and the Oxnard Airport. Also joining our team is Ariano Associates. One of the things that we know is going to be very important to these studies is the public outreach and communications. And we have Ariano Associates on our team, and Patrick and Corey are going to go into a little bit more detail here momentarily as it relates to their particular roles in this planning study. I just wanted to talk briefly, if we could go to the next slide, and just hit on the schedule. There's a lot of information contained on this particular slide. And like I'd mentioned, Patrick and Corey are going to go into more detail as it relates to the Camarillo Airport layout plan, and then the Part 150 noise compatibility studies for each airport. But I think it's important to note that as we're getting all three of these projects started here at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're all going to end at the same time. As you can see here, each particular project, especially the airport layout plan update, in comparison to the Part 150 noise compatibility studies, each one has its own set of elements and tasks that it will follow. So as we're starting all three generally here at the same time, they will take their own course of action, if you will, and be adherent to the elements and tasks that are prescribed by the Federal Aviation Administration as we move into these projects. If you look at the bottom of each one of those particular projects that are outlined here, we have different phases. And the pre-work, the study, and the documentation phases are similar to all three projects. And I think it's important to note too, as we've gotten started on these projects already internally, we've been coordinating with the Department of Airports. And it's important to do that just because there's a lot of upfront work that's going to be needed on these particular studies, especially as it relates to the inventory data gathering phase and then the forecasts. For instance, the Camarillo Airport layout plan update does contain some elements that are going to feed into the Camarillo Airport Part 150 noise compatibility study as it relates to looking at the types of aircraft that operate at the airport and then coming up with a forecast of aviation demand for overall number of operations, as well as the type of aircraft to utilize the airport over the next several years. So that information will be fed into the Part 150 study, and the Oxnard Airport will be undertaking some of the same things. So just wanted to hit briefly, kind of highlighting these three particular studies and the process that goes into each one. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Taylor, and he's going to go into a lot more detail on the Camarillo Airport layout plan update. And then he's going to turn it over to Corey Lewis, who's going to detail the Part 150 studies. So Patrick, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Madam Chair, members of the commission, thanks for having us. Dave, you can go to the next slide. So as you know, we're kicking off an ALP update with narrative reports. So this is a shift from 2001 when the airport department initiated a master plan. And then some early feedback from that study showed there wasn't support for a process that would consider significant changes to the airport or to airport operations. So the airport department negotiated with FAA, and both agreed to scale back that master plan study to what is called an airport layout plan and narrative report, and we call it an ALP update for short. And this is a similar study, not as in-depth as a master plan, but it will meet the FAA's minimum planning standard requirements for an updated airport layout plan. So as we enter this study, there are several assumptions that we'll make, and one of them is that there won't be any changes to the airport's current role, which is a general aviation reliever airport. And our planning effort will work within the confines of the joint powers agreement that's in place right now. Slide. So officially, it's called an airport layout plan and narrative report, and as I mentioned, we shorthand it as an ALP update. And the FAA requires that airports have a current ALP, and so the ALP is that set of technical drawings that reflect the current condition of the airport and the future condition of the airport. Any project for which the airport is seeking federal funding must be depicted on that ALP. I mentioned that a master plan is the primary planning document for an airport, which is typically updated every 7 to 10 years or is needed to address changes in the aviation industry or changes at that airport. An alternative is what we're going to be working on, which is the ALP update, which is limited in scope and cost and typically has a shorter outlook, which is in this case probably 5 to 7 year outlook versus a 20-year outlook for a master plan. The master plan for the airport, which is current, was completed in 2011. And since that time, there's been a number of FAA design standards for airfield configuration that have changed. And so that's going to be a big part of this study, is to update the airport layout plan to reflect those changes. And there's a couple mentioned on there. There's an airport aerial survey referred to as an AGIS, which is required for airports these days. The taxiway design standards have changed completely. Some runway protection zone issues have also changed, as well as land use planning. So we'll be looking at each of those elements in this study. In fact, this project could probably be better termed and kind of an enhanced ALP update and narrative report, because it still includes many elements that you might find in a master plan, such as public involvement, which is not required in an ALP update, but we have several public workshops planned. We also have, as Matt mentioned, the language translation and interpretation element. In fact, this is something above and beyond a master plan that we are also doing for not only this study, but the Part 150 studies as well. And another element is some alternatives development, so we can look at kind of different options on which way the plan might go in the future. So we can go to the next slide. So kind of to summarize, these are the assumptions that Camarillo will remain a reliever general aviation airport. The role of the airport will not change. This plan will work within the guidelines of the JPA. A federal funding program will remain in place. That program being the Airport Improvement Program to support future capital improvement projects at the airport. And as a result, most, if not all, of the projects that emerged from this study would be eligible for FAA funding. Those are the assumptions we have going in. Next slide. So kind of the will not slide. The ALP update assumes that the current role as a general aviation reliever airport will remain the same. The ALP update will plan for maintenance and rehabilitation of existing pavements and facilities. The ALP update will have a short-term 5 to 7 year capital improvement program. And it will meet FAA requirements to have a current approved ALP on file. The ALP update is narrowly focused and will not consider changes to the role of the airport, and the ALP update will not consider scheduled airline service, for example, or large air cargo activity or extension of the runway. So we're fairly narrowly focused with this study. Slide. Next. So key takeaways, just to summarize, the ALP updates assumes there's not going to be a change in the role of the airport, and it would continue to operate under the powers of under the guidance of the JPA. So no commercial service, we won't be discussing that. We won't be discussing large air cargo operations, and we won't be discussing changes to the runway length. I think I got one slide left. So just a little focus on the project schedule for the ALP update. There are certain elements that we'll cover, including an inventory element and a forecasting element. That forecasting will project over the next 20 years based aircraft and operational levels. And that forecast, once approved by the FAA, will feed into the Part 150 studies. And we'll also be doing a forecast for the Oxnard Part 150 study that will feed into that. And then the other elements are facility requirements. So what facilities would be needed to accommodate the forecast, as well as development alternatives, and then a recommended development plan would be presented along with a capital improvement program. And again, that CIP will cover probably the next 5 to 7 years or so. In this schedule, you can see the pre-work element. So we have actually been working a little bit in the background on this ALP update already. That pre-work is basically internet research and data collection and right there, yep. And we've kind of set up some of our forecasting models in anticipation of today, of kicking off the project today. So we're entering the study phase. So several months of the study phase, along with 2 and then ultimately 3 public workshops to discuss the progress to date. So overall, we're anticipating about a 15-month project, and depending on approval timeframes, that can be a little shorter or a little longer, but that's a good place to start. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the commission?
Yes, Steve Weiss.
Steve, go ahead, please.
With all due respect, I have the greatest respect for Kaufman and Associates, but I think this whole presentation is a cop-out. I don't see anywhere in here that they're addressing what's in the best interest of Ventura County. They bent to pressures from the NIMBYs, if you will, and I don't feel that what's being presented here is in the benefit of Camarillo Airport. So my position is to nix this program until we can come up with something that better supports the needs of Ventura County. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there other comments from the commission?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. Thanks, Matt, for the presentation, and a couple things. First, you guys are going to be doing a noise study. That's what you presented there as well.
That is another study that Corey's going to talk about.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay. And are we going to hear about that, or?
Yeah, he's got a presentation for that.
Okay. So we're not done with this presentation.
Correct.
Okay. I'd like to hold my comments until we're done with the presentation.
Steve, do you have any comments?
I do. I want to thank Matt and Patrick as well for the presentation. I want to comment on how sensitive you are to the community, and I appreciate that. I think that's very important. And also the agreement under which this airport was opened way back in, I guess, the 70s, the joint agreement. I think respecting that and being mindful of that is very important. It sounds like that's very much on your radar screen, and I appreciate seeing that. I think that's the right way to proceed. Thank you for that.
One other comment I would like to add to that is, we've had weeks and months of comments in next door Cartagena about how Camarillo was going to be turned into a commercial airport because of Amazon, and there were going to be all these commercial flights coming into Camarillo. And these would be I would say I'm very impressed with the very hard work of the airport staff to do the education, particularly in Camarillo, for the people now who, I would say, the area people in Camarillo who have a much better understanding that Camarillo will not be turned into a commercial airport. And there have been a lot of corrections made by citizens in Camarillo of those who still think that might happen. So compliments to airport staff who've done a lot of very hard work to correct that particular issue. Any other comments? We can go on.
I have a comment. This is Bob Trimborn. Just want to say thank
Sorry,
you,
Bob, I didn't see your hand.
just want to say thank you, Matt and Pat, for that great presentation. The ALP update, as I think Patrick talked about, sets the tone for projects that come into the future, right? The ASIPs. And I think, could you expand on that just briefly on why it's important to do the ALP update and how that affects federal funding for the airport?
Sure, Bob. Good to see you again. Anything that the airport would seek funding from the FAA on has to be depicted on the ALP. And that includes even just routine maintenance of pavement surfaces. So if it's not captured on an updated, on a current approved ALP by the FAA, then any grant funds that may be sought can't be awarded. So this is really a baseline. You have to have that done in order to continue receiving federal grants for development projects.
Thank you. And again, how many public comment opportunities will there be in the development of the plan?
Well, there'll be we'll have a project website for all three projects, and so we can receive comments on the comment page on those anytime. So those are going to be open and live to the public at the end of the week. So we're going to launch those three at the same time. We have three formal public workshops scoped for the ALP update. And so those will come at strategic points when we have kind of made some progress through the draft narrative report, and we'll have some material to talk about, including one at the end when the report is basically in a draft final mode.
So will those be live meetings or virtual meetings or both?
I'm not exactly sure on that.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure we're going to be doing them live.
Yeah, Commissioner Trimborn, Madam Chair, this is Matt Quick. The intent is to have an in-person component to those public workshops as long as the local codes and regulations would allow that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, did you have any, your hand is still raised. Did you have any comments still?
Yeah, just really quick regarding this presentation. Matt and Patrick, will you be making the same presentation to the authority?
Yes, that's the intent.
All right, thank you.
Thursday.
Thank you.
And we've only been through 1/3 of the presentation, so there's more to come.
Okay.
So clarification here, as far as the authorities, you'll be making the Camarillo part to the Camarillo Authority and the Oxnard part to the Oxnard Authority, not jointly to both. Is that correct? I mean, Oxnard Airport Authority has no auspices over Camarillo and vice versa.
If I could, I think that's a process answer. In other words, the authority meets, but both authorities are in the meeting at the same time. And so you'll be presenting, the Camarillo Authority will consider the Camarillo piece, the Oxnard piece. Keith, you might want to clarify that.
They'll do the presentation as a whole. We have a section that touches both airports, so that's the presentation will be in that section.
Thank you. We are still actually in the process, so can we continue with the Oxnard Airport, please?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we appreciate the opportunity to be with you this evening. And Dave, if you could advance to the next slide, please. As we've discussed, we're undertaking three planning studies, the Camarillo ALP update study, and also two Part 150 noise compatibility studies, one for Camarillo Airport and one for Oxnard Airport. As Patrick mentioned, as Matt mentioned, all the studies are beginning at the same time, but may not end up at the same end at the same time. But we're anticipating that the Part 150 studies will take approximately 18 to 20 months to complete. Here you see the schematic version of the schedule. And I'll get into that in more detail in a few minutes. But before I do start, I wanted to kind of touch on some of the regulatory framework that we're talking about when we're considering noise compatibility studies. And as you see on the screen, there are several different entities that have a role in aircraft noise and the development of a Part 150 study. So, for example, we have the FAA, which establishes airspace and identifying where aircraft may be flown. FAA also sets aircraft noise standards and also has a responsibility for certifying aircraft and pilots. And speaking of pilots have a responsibility for the safe operation of aircraft in the air and on the ground. Ultimately the pilots are responsible once the aircraft takes off. And so Ventura County doesn't have any specific control over the aircraft while they're in flight, but may establish run-up times and voluntary noise abatement procedures. So that is for Ventura County inside the airport fence, but Ventura County also has a land use authority over the areas surrounding the airport. So the Ventura County planning communicates with the communities and developers and hopes that they will promote land use compatibility. So beyond that, the United States has no land use authority, so the FAA cannot state what can and can be constructed outside the airport fence. And then as we're looking at the state of California, has requires the preparation of airport land use compatibility plans, or the ALUCP or CLUP documents. But the state also enables local land use planning through the adoption of zoning ordinances. And Dave, you can step on to the next slide. So overall, when we're considering a Part 150 study, so that Part 150 phrase comes from 14 CFR Part 150, or Code of Federal Regulations. So the development of a Part 150 noise compatibility planning study is very prescripted. There's a process outlined in the Code of Federal Regulations. So when an airport sponsor, such as Ventura County, takes on funding or receives grant funding, it's understood that the airport sponsor will follow the outline of 14 CFR Part 150 when developing the study. So a few items to note, and there are references to Oxnard Airport, but these slides also apply to Camarillo Airport. So as we're discussing what a Part 150 does and does not do, the bullet points on the screen, I outline those items. So Part 150 is intended to identify the current and projected annualized noise levels using the CNEL noise metric, that's community noise equivalent level. The Part 150 study is intended to identify measures to reduce noise impacts where those have been identified within the contours. The Part 150 has a land use compatibility component and encourages future land uses which are compatible with aircraft noise, such as commercial or industrial development in undeveloped areas. The Part 150 study can be used to identify methods to reduce adverse impacts of noise above FAA thresholds in existing residential areas. And there's also a procedure to implement, review, and update the program. So notably, the Part 150 studies for both airports were completed close to 20 years ago. So at this time, we are updating those two studies. So a few items to note that the Part 150 studies do not do. So that's evaluate aircraft operations from other area airports. So in this case, we'll be preparing noise compatibility studies for each airport individually, and we'll be considering those noise emissions from each airport separately. Part 150 studies don't consider other types of impacts such as air quality or safety. Those topics can be considered in other documents, but not within a Part 150 study context. The Part 150 study, we are required to use the CNEL noise metric, and we won't be using any other metrics besides that one. And the Part 150 study is not cannot be used to justify airport expansion. You can move on to the next. So what you see here is a detailed process slide for the for preparation of a Part 150 study. We are in the data collection, the kind of the pre-study phase right now. We're actually we'll be in Ventura County all week, collecting information for both airports. And what ultimately the two deliverable products for the Part 150 studies, that it results in the development of two volumes. The first volume is the noise exposure maps document, and that is where we put together all of the inputs for the noise exposure contours. So we have an inventory which gathers a lot of our land use base mapping. Then we will be preparing noise exposure contours, and then combining those two elements, our noise exposure contours and our land use mapping. Then we use those contours to identify any areas, any developed areas that are within the noise exposure contours, and to identify any potential noise impacts. With that information, we move into preparation of the noise compatibility program, which has it has a noise abatement element, a land use compatibility component, and then also a program management component. And along with that, during the course of the preparation of the studies, we'll have a planning advisory committee, which will be gathered here in the coming month, or those people will be invited in the coming month. And along with that, we'll also have public information workshops, as you can see along the bottom line of the process there. And ultimately, we will conclude the noise compatibility program with a public hearing. And at that point, the program measures that have been carried forward will be submitted to FAA. If you could step on to the next slide, please. So here is a closer in view of the estimated timeline. As I mentioned before, it's an 18 to 20 month process. As Patrick noted, there are FAA review timeframes in there that are beyond our control and beyond the county's control, and so that accounts for that estimated completion time range. As Patrick mentioned, there are 3 separate websites that are intended to be places where draft documents will be uploaded during the course of the studies. The studies will go live on Friday, January 13th, and the links to the studies will be available through the county airport's website. And as Matt mentioned, Ariana Associates is also on our team. Ariana will be providing translation services for the Part 150 studies, and also during our in-person meetings, there will be interpreters communicating with the Spanish speakers.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Matt Quick again with Kaufman Associates. So that wraps up our presentations as it relates to the ALP update that we had talked about earlier, and then Corey's presentation on the Part 150 study. So we would be happy to entertain any questions or listen to any comments that you all may have as it relates to these particular studies, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Matt. It's much appreciated. Members of the commission, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, Matt, this is Steve Weiss. I've
Go
heard
ahead,
all this spiel, but I haven't seen what benefit this is to our community with respect to aviation. It seems like the whole focus is on noise compatibility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a sad day where we've gone down this rat hole. That's my comment, and I look forward to your comment.
Director Freitas is happy to respond to that, Steve. I've been in airport operations, airport business for 33 years, and every airport that I've worked out.
Excuse me, Director Freitas, the question was not for you, it was for Matt. So
Okay.
I will tackle you in director's comments. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough.
Matt, can you comment on the rat hole, please?
Yes, Commissioner Weiss and Madam Chair, again, I appreciate the comment. We're approaching these particular studies as prescribed by the Federal Aviation Administration. So like had mentioned with the ALP update, I think there's a lot of benefit to the airport from the perspective of updating the ALP in order for the county to receive grant funding assistance through the Airport Improvement Program. The FAA does require the ALP to be updated. This particular project is going to look at just that. It's going to evaluate aviation demand as a result of the based aircraft and annual operations, and then translate those demand forecasts into facility requirements and come up with an overall recommended development concept and outline capital improvement projects that are going to be needed to help satisfy the potential development of the airport over the course of the next several years. So there's a lot of benefit that is provided to the airport and the community from an aviation perspective in terms of being able to outline those projects so that the county can at least entertain the potential pursuit of those projects through grant funding assistance from the Federal Aviation Administration. And I may turn it over to Corey.
Wait, Matt, let me stop you there. We're the largest county in the country without a regional airport, without common air transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get back to where we were instead of like taking 12 steps back and we make a step and a half forward?
So Commissioner Weiss and Madam Chair, members of the commission, again, we're evaluating these airports based upon the standards that they are today. And I think we don't want to lose sight of the fact that Camarillo Airport is a national reliever airport in the system. There's very few of those airports in the system. So we are looking at that airport from that perspective in terms of being able to accommodate a wide array of general aviation operations and activities. So from the standpoint of the ALP narrative and looking at the forecast of aviation demand, we are going to be looking at those different demand segments that are operating at the airport right now and coming up with projections for growth based upon what's happening within the aviation industry as a whole, not just here regionally, but also nationally.
Matt, I have a question for you, if I may.
Sure.
The process that you're using, is that also directed or mandated perhaps by the FAA that you are following particular procedure?
Yes, Madam Chair, we are looking at this from the standpoint of forecasting. That's one of the main elements of the ALP update. And there is an advisory circular that the FAA puts out there that we must adhere to when we look at the different types of demand segments from an aviation forecasting perspective. So we will be following that, but at the same time, we certainly are going to take into account what's happening locally and regionally and how that factors in to the overall forecasting and development opportunities for the airport.
Thank you. Mr. Trimborn, you had a question or
yes,
comment.
Corey, thank you for that presentation. It's very informative. There was an acronym in there, CNEL. I'd like you to expand a little bit about what that means and why you use CNEL. And the other thing I'd like you to expand upon a little bit is the outcome of the Part 150 study. How do I say this? It's the Part 150 study does not recommend mandatory noise restrictions at an airport. And I'd like you to kind of talk about that and its relationship to the Part 161 component so that people don't feel that the 150 study could somehow create operational restrictions based upon noise impacts. If that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Trimborn. So first is the CNEL, so that's Community Noise Equivalent Level. So that is a annualized noise metric that we'll be using. And later in the process, as we're talking with the PAC, and if we come back and visit with the commission, we'll get into more detail about noise modeling. But basically, we're using FAA's noise modeling software, and this is a complex piece of software, but it's the required software to be used in Part 150 studies, notably because there are airports across the United States that are all competing for potentially noise mitigation funds, and so every airport is expected to use the same software and the same type of noise exposure contours. So you may have heard of DNL if you've read articles about other airports undertaking Part 150 studies. So DNL is used in all other states except California. So that's the day-night noise level. But in California, FAA allows airports to use CNEL, which is used not only for aviation noise in the state of California, but other types of noise. So it is a uniform approach throughout the state for the evaluation of noise exposure.
Thank you.
Steve Tannehill, I believe you also had a comment.
I do. Thank you, Chairwoman. As well, Corey, thank you for the presentation. I do have a couple comments I want to make, and I am very excited about the 150 study. But a little background on history as I understand it, as you probably saw from the first part of the meeting, and if you've had a chance to read our packet, we do have a challenge with the Oxnard Airport. We have a significant number of noise complaints that come out of communities that are near the airport, specifically Oxnard Shores and Seabridge, Westport, Via Marina. One of my concerns is there's a boilerplate approach to these CNEL that the FAA mandates and that the state mandates. And I have some concerns that may not look at these communities. So I guess my question is, and I think this whole impetus from the community to get the Part 150 came in large part because of these communities saying, we have a problem, let's do a study, let's see if we can solve this problem. And airport staff said a Part 150 study is a good tool to help us get our arms around this and see what we can and cannot do. And I will mention as well to the team, as you mentioned, Part 150 studies were done at both airports 20 years ago, but the Oxnard one was never adopted. And frankly, I've never seen it. So, but the Camarillo one was. And the Camarillo one has 12 different noise abatement recommended procedures, including one that I know people in Oxnard would like to see. Recommendation number 5 says, continue advising right traffic on runway 8 so as to avoid low overflights of the city. This measure recommends that the DOA continue to promote the use of a right-hand traffic pattern on runway 8 so as to avoid low overflights of the city. A right traffic pattern on runway 8 helps avoid low overflights of residential areas north of the airport. FAA action approved as a voluntary measure. This, frankly, is exactly the kind of thing that the people in Oxnard would like to see. So I guess I have a series of questions for you, Corey, and maybe beyond, I don't know, which is, if the CNEL does not look at these communities, and if you look at our packet, you can see where the noise problem is. How can we include looking at these communities as part of this study? And can it be done using local funds, Department of Airport funds? I understand the FAA may not pay for it, but if it doesn't cover these areas, can we do it, engage with you to do it, to expand into these areas, and we would cover the cost of that? So that's one question I have. Let me get them all on the table, and then you can address all of them. I've already mentioned right traffic, but I do want to say that a specific outcome people are hoping for. Right now, we have right traffic as a voluntary measure, and it gets used a fair amount of the time. People would like to see if Oxnard can be designated as a default right traffic airport. So my question is that going to be part of the study? And then my final question, and this alludes to something I think Director Weiss referenced, which is passenger service. As you may be aware, passenger service ended 14 years ago at Oxnard. And I've done a lot of digging on this. I know others have as well. The best information I have is that that ship has sailed, that the turboprops and the other planes that were using Oxnard, the airlines don't use them anymore, and so it's not coming back. Do you look at that as part of this study when you're evaluating, how this airport's going to be used in the future? So I guess it's a three-part question for you. Thank you, Corey.
All right. Thank you for the background information and the questions, Commissioner Tannehill. I've written them down here so I can hopefully work through responses for you. So when we're looking at communities potentially outside the CNEL contours, I think maybe it is premature to say how far out certain communities are. We definitely need to go through the process, develop the noise exposure contours. In a typical Part 150 study, you would stop your contours at the 65 CNEL, but based on the previous work efforts for the Part 150 studies, the 60 CNEL noise contour was depicted, and that is something that we are doing again as part of this study, and that is something that is that is a piece that is not paid for by FAA. That the county went ahead and engaged Kaufman Associates to do that. So there are some other some opportunities to go beyond what FAA is requesting. So as we're talking about right-hand traffic and evaluating those measures, so as part of both studies, we will look at the measures that were recommended 20 years ago. A shift in FAA's review of Part 150 studies has occurred. So now FAA will really only approve measures that decrease noise impacts based on Part 150 standards. So as we go through the study, if we identify residences within within FAA's threshold, the 65 CNEL threshold, then we would look at opportunities and changes operationally, where aircraft are flown, and then we would be able to, shift to, we could model with the AEDT model. We could identify whether or not those procedures would decrease the number of impacted residences. So FAA has shifted away from approving for the purposes of Part 150 measures that would seem like they would decrease noise. That change on FAA's side, they would actually reject something that was not empirically proven to decrease noise. So that is a change that we're dealing with in the industry. And then as we look toward the future, in the case of both studies, we'll be working with Patrick. We'll be developing operations forecast and fleet mix changes. So any of those forecast, any potential changes in the operations will come straight from forecast tasks that will be prepared for the Camarillo ALP narrative update, and then an independent task associated with the Oxnard Part 150 will be a forecast update.
Thank you, Corey. Matt, do you have any further questions?
Madam Chair, I don't really have anything more to add. Just that last piece, like Corey had talked about, given the nature, and Patrick spelled this out earlier, given the nature of the Camarillo study being an airport layout plan update, It's a smaller scale, a more focused study that looks at existing activity and makes forecasts based upon what's currently happening at the airport. So that's going to be the focus of that particular forecast and how that plays in to the inputs for the noise studies for Camarillo. And then we'll do the same thing for Oxnard based upon a previous forecast that was approved by the FAA a few years back as it related to that particular ALP update that was done.
Thank you. Matt Johnson?
Yeah, thank you. Corey, thanks for everything. Matt, thanks for everything. Just a couple things. You've completed many of these noise studies for other airports, I assume, in the past, like numerous studies. How many of these studies have you guys done approximately?
So I've been preparing Part 150 studies for the last 18 years. I've done them for close to 15 to 20 airports.
Okay. What generally do you find in like a similar situation as ours, where we're updating the study from 20 years ago, so you have something to reference? What do you generally find comes of these studies for the airports and to put to use? I know the obvious, it's going to give us contours, it's going to show us some of the things we talked about, things like that. But for the most part, do you see significant changes occurring? What generally is found?
I've worked on studies where the noise contours have gotten significantly smaller, but I've also worked on them where they've gotten a lot larger. There's just, the old adage is, you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. So here, we just need to go through the process, develop the forecast. And I will note that, and kind of getting back to one of the other questions, we're going to look at a 20-year forecast contour. So a typical Part 150 study, you would just do an existing condition contour and then a 5-year condition contour. And those two sets of contours help identify areas, potentially impacted areas where FAA funding could be available for either mitigation or primarily mitigation. But for a land use planning effort, the county has elected to do a 20-year contour, which is in addition to the Part 150 grant.
Will those outside of the airport contours address land usage that has also changed when it's addressing impacted residences and things of that nature, potentially? For example, there wasn't anything there before.
Yes. Yeah. So in contrast to something like an airport land use compatibility plan, where you're only looking at undeveloped land, here we'll look at development that has occurred since the preparation of the last Part 150 studies. And if those contours now, extend over certain areas, we can quantify that through the study.
Okay.
One other question I have for you. I'm sorry, Matt, but one other question or comment I have for you. This particular area sometimes can have some rather monstrous Santa Anas, to put it mildly. And, that puts us like on runway 8, for example, at Camarillo, which does actually change the traffic. So, it might also be a point to clarify that when, let's say, instead of 2.6, it's 8, why that traffic might be right traffic instead of left traffic, because some folks might not understand that, and that might be clarified as part of education. I apologize, Matt, I did interrupt you, but it just, was an issue.
Yeah, I just wanted to respectfully caution, the directors, this commission, that, when we use words like significant problem and things like that, I mean, we are being, that's kind of, those are subjective. Significant is subjective. So I'm looking forward to this process being scientific, taking data, empirical data, and doing analysis. And I'm hoping that, our boards or advisories at the county take a look at this accordingly, as well as the community. And I'm looking forward to those outcomes. And then my last question, will you be presenting this also to the authorities?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Questions or comments? Any last questions? Okay. This was very educational. At this point, we would like to have a recommendation from the commission. Is there a recommendation to receive and file this presentation?
Chair Vondergraaf, there are members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
Okay, are there members of the public wishing to speak on it?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. We'll start by promoting Barb Filkins, followed by Walter Hagedorn. And Ms. Filkins, please unmute, share your screen if you'd like, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I'll leave the screen off. Just a couple comments. I would like to make a comment on Commissioner Tannehill's comment about local communities. The FAA process, as far as the FAR 150 studies, is I'll say scientific, and I've been on that side of the fence in the past. So if you do try to use local funds, the process has to be scientific, transparent, and in alliance with whatever the FAA findings are. That's my personal comment, but I can also underlie it with the fact that I'm fairly close to an airport that has never taken federal fundings and has a noise problem. The other comment I just wanted to make was on when the system in Ventura County goes to small runways, which is what Magoo calls when we're on 8 and 7. I was at Oxnard the other day. We had an east wind. I asked for left traffic in the pattern and was told to go runway or right traffic simply because the arrivals into Camarillo. So the question I would have is, what are the concern? How does the study address some of the airspace concerns? End of comment.
Okay, we will next hear from Mr. Hagedorn. Please unmute, and I see your screen. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, members of the commission. I'm Walter Hagedorn. I'm chair of the Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council. I would like to comment on the Part 150 study for Oxnard Airport. Previous to this new study, a lengthy 150 study was completed in the year 2000 by Kaufman and Associates. Although we were aware of the noise exposure maps that were accepted by the FAA at that time, the full report was not available to us. After acquiring that study, we realized that the noise exposure maps were based on air traffic patterns that had been established by the airport and showed no traffic over Oxnard Shores or Channel Island Harbor. These maps were used in real estate disclosures provided to us when we purchased our homes. Although we've been criticized for complaining about an airport that we knew was here when we moved in, a reasonable person could look at the disclosures and the maps provided and be reasonably assured that flights would not go over Oxnard Shores. As we all know, that certainly is not the case today. Given this, it is imperative that the community be given representation in the preparation of this study. At a July 14th, 2002 Airport Authority meeting, we requested that the neighborhood councils be part of the Planning Advisory Committee, the PAC, that oversees the Part 150 study. In the agenda package for this meeting tonight, there is a contract for the ALP for Camarillo Airport, which includes Task 5.1, which states the membership and purpose of the PAC. Since there's no contract in the agenda package for the 150 study, I want to make sure that this item is included and that neighborhood council chairs for the affected neighborhoods are part of the community representation. I am somewhat surprised on page 106 of the agenda. There's a status report that is given. It shows that the consultants are already determining flight patterns. I think that's true. You can correct me on that. And other information that should be overseen by the PAC. I would like to make sure that the public has some input on that. Also, it is noted, and Steve mentioned this, that the FAA does not provide funding for the committee or other public input. It is important that the Department of Airports provide any additional funds that are required to ensure adequate public input. Also, In the status report, it also states that the consultant will provide data as the FAA requires. The FAA is in the business of maintaining airports, not necessarily of providing adequate public input to the study. Given that, it is important that the Department of Airports also provide any funding that is required outside of the FAA requirements to ensure that the noise contours and other issues pertaining to our neighborhoods is provided. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now promote Ben D. Benedetto. You can unmute, share your screen if you'd like, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Mr. Di Benedetto,
Yes,
please.
ma'am. Yeah, here we go. Let me get unmuted our video here. There we go. Pretty much agree with what Mr. Hagedorn had to say. It's interesting because the 1998 noise study was not in the archives of the commission or the authority or anything. And we found reference to it when motion was made to approve the new study. And we requested of the airport director that he provide the old study so that we as the community have a basis to understand the scope and the method of the new study, in which he did. I have a copy of it. I've read it. It's 325 pages, and there's a ton of information in there. But the simple fact that it was never adopted by the authority has run into a number of issues regarding development, which directly relates to noise and safety, where we are now. For instance, the Teal Club parcel, the old Teal Club parcel of existing homes that was there then, got up to a 75 CNEL. And the recommendation was that the city purchase that property, that there was no way it could be mitigated. And you've probably reviewed the old study, preparing to do the new study, but nothing was done about that. Those folks are still there, and it's still an issue. So I would like to be somewhat assured that we're probably going to see something along those lines for those folks. Also, a number of properties that around the airport along 5th Street that were designated in the study as business park airport related, the city has changed the zoning and entitled a development of about 900 homes called Portofino, which has not begun construction yet, but has been fully entitled. So it will be built on. They're also looking at developing the rest of the Teal Club parcel along the north side of the runway, although the city delayed the response to the EIR from last March, and they've continued to delay it. And as far as I know, they have not responded to the public comment on the EIR for that particular development. So I would expect they're going to do that soon. Seems to me if there's a problem with the old Teal Club, we really ought to be getting some sound levels on where the new Teal Club development would go. And last but not least is the North Shore development, which is directly to the west of the end of the runway at Harbor and 5th. Fully entitled. Construction started, some infrastructure is in. Builder went bankrupt, sold the entitlement to another company, which intends to finish the project. That's a direct flight path over the west end of the airport going to the ocean. And the city in the EIR for that particular parcel included a letter to the developer saying that it would not be overflown. So there are some real issues that we have to look at for safety and for accountability on what development should go forward and what shouldn't. Obviously, we have the need for a lot more sound measuring devices in areas like those areas that are going to then not be airport related business, but community business. And my last comment is, I think, as Mr. Hagedorn mentioned, the motion for approval of this particular study included an amendment to involve the neighborhood councils. And given what's going on, I really think we need to enroll the neighborhood councils. I think a good spot for them would be on the Planning Advisory Committee. Not limited to that. I think we can all work together and inform the communities of what's going on and put some of this angst aside and work through this. But it's a serious issue. We really have to get down to it. I thank you for your work on this study and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Di Benedetto. Are there any further public comments, or either verbal or written?
There are no hands raised and we did not receive any written comments.
Okay. Want to make sure there's no other comments. Is there a recommendation to receive and file the presentation?
So moved, Steve Weiss.
Is there a second?
I'll second Steve Tannehill.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call for approval, please?
Chair Vondergraff,
Yes.
Maggie Bird,
Yes.
Matthew Johnston,
Yes.
Robert Trimborn,
Yes.
Gerald Abramson,
Yes.
Steve Weiss,
Aye.
Steve Tannehill.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously 7-0.
Thank you very much. Let us move on to item C, the approval and authorization for the Director of Airports or designee to sign amendment number 1 to the consulting services contract for the Camarillo Airport Master Plan to transition it to an airport layout plan with Kaufman Associates, decreasing total amount of contract by $50,000 to $686,032 and increasing airport's cost share. Mr. Director?
Madam Chair, I have Aaron Powers from the department give an overview of this item.
Good evening,
Thank
Chair
you.
Vondergraff and Commission members. Thank you very much, Keith. So going back to April of 2020, the Department of Airports awarded a contract to Kaufman Associates for a master plan update in the amount of $741,094. Kaufman just did a thorough job of explaining the transition of the master plan to an airport layout plan update. And so this evening, the contract amendment before you is really to formally document the change. And it also adds language, translation, interpretation services to the contract that were not originally included, but we believe are important to increase communication and outreach with our community. It's important to note that while the transition from a master plan to an ALP update reduces the contract amount some, the overall share of the department's out-of-pocket costs does increase compared to the original contract, and it increases by a significant amount. We are going from $0 out of pocket to a little over $333,000. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands why that is. There are several factors that come into play. First being that the master plan was funded at 100% level, so there was no out-of-pocket cost to the airport. But when we negotiated the transition to an ALP update with the FAA, they could only offer us a 90% funding level of eligible expenses. Additionally, the airport had to pay for some costs that we already incurred under the master plan process that had begun and that are not eligible for reimbursement under an ALP update. But more significantly, the majority of the increased out-of-pocket costs, and that's a little over $228,000, comes from our significant commitment and investment in communication and transparency. So ALP updates or airport layout plan updates don't normally have a community meeting or workshop or information workshop component. It is an internal process because you're not changing anything significant about the airport. So in this case, we are maintaining the 3 remaining meetings that were originally scoped under the master plan. And we will be sharing the progress of the airport layout plan update with the community so everyone can see what's going on, and they'll have the opportunity to ask questions and learn more about the process as it's happening. And then additionally, we added Spanish language translation of the narratives and live meeting interpretation with Spanish and Mixteco interpreters for those meetings. Therefore, staff request that your commission recommend the board approve the request to amend the contract. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Steve Weiss, I'm totally opposed to this. As a show of good faith on behalf of Kaufman, I propose that they split the difference. We pick up half of the airport share. We pick up the other half. This is a good example why government shouldn't be in business, in my opinion. Thank you.
Other recommendations from the commission?
I have a comment, Madam Chair.
Please.
I just want to say, I think this is great, that you're doing the extra outreach to talk to the community. I'm always mindful of the fact that these are public airports. These are owned by the county. As such, involving the public seems to me to make a ton of sense. And I'm also mindful of the fact that, whether it comes out of an FAA grant or comes out of our reserves, of which, as we all know, per our recent reports, we have $19 million in reserves. We have significant reserves. Other than the fee income, they're both public monies. I mean, the money we're getting from the federal government is public tax money paid by people who use the commercial airline system. So I think it's all public money. I think we should be prudent with all of it, mindful of all of it, respectful of all of it. But I think increasing the communication to our community. And I understand too, having to switch from a master plan to an ALP, that was kind of unanticipated, if you will. And there was a change of leadership, and the master plan that was rolled out was not well received, and it was put on the shelf. And I think staff is trying to respond to the community transition to the ALP, and that has some implications for the funding. But anyway, those are my thoughts with respect to that. Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Any comments from the public?
Chair, we did not receive any written comments on this item, and I am not seeing any hands raised from members of the public.
Okay. The request from staff is recommending that the Board of Supervisors, that the Commission and Authority recommend the Board of Supervisors approve and authorize the Director of Airports or designee to sign Amendment Number 1 of the consulting contract with Kaufman and Associates for the Camarillo Airport Master Plan to transition it to an airport layout plan update. I won't read the rest of it. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the staff recommendation. This is Bob Trimboard.
Is there a second?
I second.
second.
Go ahead, Maggie. I second the last one.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Von der Graaf.
Approved? Yes.
Thank you. Maggie Bird,
Yes.
Matthew Johnston,
Yes.
Robert Trimborn,
Yes.
Gerald Abramson,
Yes.
Steve Weiss.
Opposed, and let the record so show.
Thank you. Steve Tannehill.
Yes.
That motion passes 6-1 with a nay by Commissioner Steve Tannehill.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Steve Weiss.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you. Let the record reflect that motion passes 6-1 with a no vote by Commissioner Steve Weiss. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to item D, realignment of the Aviation Advisory Commission. In an effort to broaden public outreach, very important, and transparency for the Department of Airports and the county, and the Department of Airports is recommending that the Aviation Advisory Commission meetings be changed from nighttime to morning or lunchtime. It is also recommended that the meetings be held on the same day as the Airport Authority meetings, which are currently held on the second Thursday of each month. Mr. Director, do you have comments?
I do. Just again, some background. Some of it's in the report, but this was a question that came up with from the County Board of Supervisors back in February of 2022, asking that airport staff look at the effectiveness, efficiency of all the committees and authorities and bodies that have input with the department's operation and mission. So, in doing some background, you see that in the memo we prepared. The Aviation Advisory Commission was created back in 1967 when we only had one airport, Oxnard Airport. Then moving forward, when Camarillo was decommissioned and given to the county, that's when the authorities were created. 1976, Camarillo Airport Authority was created to be followed in 1980 by the Oxnard Authority. So we have, and what you see now, even though if you look through the bylaws, the language is a little different in what they do. But in the end, if you look at the agendas for tonight's meeting and the authority meetings, Oxnard and Camarillo, which are 3 nights away on Thursday of this week, they're the same. So that got to, what can we do to make efficiency and effectiveness for the community members? As I put in this memo, not having an AAC meeting, removing one might save 2 to 4 hours a month. It's not a significant staff savings. It's what can we do to open up, the opportunities, as we heard from the community members, something that's different, as opposed to, a Monday night meeting and a Thursday night meeting, whether it's 3 days apart or sometimes it falls in different weeks, it's 10 days apart. What's the opportunity? And that's where the idea is, which why I will recommend that we move to either a lunch or breakfast meeting on the same day as the airport authority to allow more opportunity. You saw the presentation or heard the presentation from our consultants, Kaufman. We're going to spend the next 1.5 years plus with 2 Part 150 studies and an ALP update narrative. Each of those have 3 public meetings as well. So we got 9 public meetings over the next 1.5 years to fit in the meetings that we have with the AAC and the 2 airport authorities. So again, those are the reasons for the recommendation. It seems to be the same agenda that pretty much is mirrored from AAC to the airport authority each month. So it's really about hearing and opportunities, because if you have things that don't allow you to attend a night meeting, you don't have an opportunity. You obviously can submit comments online, but at least a lunch or breakfast would open that up if you worked night shift or you had family commitments at night and you couldn't attend night meetings for whatever reason. So that's my thought. Open to questions and input. I will make this same presentation ultimately to the authority and then to the Board of Supervisors, which have asked that the department give some thought to this and make a recommendation.
So Steve Weiss, I have some thoughts here. I think it's a great idea. Over the years, missing college basketball championships on a Monday night, or tonight, the NC2A football championship. But I think we're losing sight, and personally, I'd be all for that. But I think most people work during the day. I think we're losing sight of the fact of who's out there, who are we looking to provide transparency? When you mentioned, oh, people that work at night. Well, don't the majority of people work during the day? I think this is absurd. And I'm all for it personally. End of my
I guess I'm not sure whether I'm agreeing with Steve or disagreeing with Steve as far as supporting. But I think that, you know, I look at the duplicity of some of these activities, and even, you know, we're paying these consultants, and I understand public comment, but I venture to guess that all the same public and the communities that we speak of are also speaking at the authority. I mean, we know so, right? They all show up to the authorities. The same comments are prepared. And I'm, you know, I was appointed to this position most recently. I think I'm the newest one on the commission. And I know we had this discussion in November about, you know, the viability of this commission. But as I study the authorities agenda and I look at our activity, and frankly, in my dialogues with Matt, who appointed me, you know, the theory of we're supposed to be kind of, you know, talking to them and maybe giving them some feedback about some things. I venture to guess that that's not something that everyone on this commission is doing, is talking to their counterparts on the authority and really playing an advisory role, but rather just going through and, you know, taking steps to complete the same exact agenda they're doing and the community is hearing about. I think we've got great measures that I've seen go in place regarding, you know, we now have an outreach person that's a staff member with the Department of Airports. We have a conscientious effort that it sounds like the department's airports have adopted to include, you know, public inputs and comments. We go so far as talk about these, the community leaders and, you know, getting their involvements in things. I just think we really should take a strong look at not just changing, you know, when we meet, because that's just playing with times, but maybe revisit that, you know, what is the value of this commission?
You know, there was the original discussion about, do we need to meet every month? And, you know, for some of us who've been on this commission a long time, you know, a lot of this discussion is exactly the same thing. And the question is, you know, is it an efficient use of time to meet on a monthly basis? Again, I'm just laying it out there for discussion.
Well, you know, who do we advise to? I mean, because, you know, as it relates to, you know, our authority over staff and things of that nature, that's not, you know, that's not this commission's authority. So who are we advising?
So if I could, you know, I have some comments as well. First of all, I am very sympathetic to the duplicative nature of the two agendas. I am, and I'm aware of the time spent, and I'm sympathetic to staff. The item on that we're being asked to vote on is whether to meet during the day, not disband the commission or these other factors. But I will respond. I do talk to my supervisor quite frequently. Carmen Ramirez appointed me, and we spoke a lot. Vianney has taken over, and I do talk to Vianney, and I do talk to Robert, her chief of staff, and I take that role very seriously, and I think they did as well. If others are not doing that, I'd say that's not a failure of this design of what we're doing. It may be the failure of how it's being utilized, but the design should be, I think, I agree with you, Matt, we should be talking to our supervisors and giving them counsel, and they should be talking to us. So, and then as far as the repetitive nature, again, I'm sympathetic. I'm not, but when I dug into it, they have different functions. We are appointed by the Board of Supervisors, as you know, we are to advise them, and our bylaws specifically state we are not subordinate to the airport authority, that we are independent of it. So we're an advisory to the Board of Supervisors. The airport authority represents the cities as well as the counties. So they're a joint powers agreement that's split between the city and the county. I think they're there to talk about the interests of Oxnard relative to Oxnard Airport, Camarillo relative to Camarillo Airport. So, you know, maybe the answer to this is to look at ways that we can distinguish these two bodies. And maybe we should have different agendas, and maybe there are different things that we should consider and go down that path, you know, rather than suggesting, you know, we don't have a purpose, because I think we do. So anyway, those are my thoughts there. But again, I will point out the item on the table is simply whether we're going to meet during the day. And I'm kind of with, I think it was Commissioner Weiss. Well, for me personally, it'd probably be better. I just don't have any evidence that it's better for the community. I think most people work during the day and prefer a night meeting to dial in. So that would be my thought on that.
Sorry, and just for clarification, and you know, I do not the Board of Supervisors have representation, or they're represented on the authority?
Yes, they are.
So that's an important item that you know, we all need to, again, let's clarify, is that the authorities have 2 board members, and then whether you're talking City of Oxnard or City of Camarillo, have 2 city council members, and then 1 at large in each of those areas. So their opportunity to meet at night and communicate your issues on the same agenda items is there. So that's not being taken away. And I would also like to offer that I've gotten asked many times, everybody, as you've mentioned, time is important. And I want to be clear, staff is going to be here, whether it's, you know, doing what we're doing and nothing changes or something different. But the question I get on a regular basis, well, which meeting do I attend? Because the members of the public are confused. And I would disagree with Mr. Tannehill a bit, is if you separate them, we already have a difficult time trying to get transparent, getting information out to the public. If we now have these 2 agendas, now I've got to figure out, well, which item do I follow and which one do I communicate because I have a concern on this thing. It should be one place, one-stop shopping. And that was the idea of at least having, you know, the same day, whichever meeting worked for you, day or evening, you could go to and make your concern or your input in a place, as opposed to separating them. That's just my 2 cents on it.
Is there any reason that we can't do it on a trial basis?
100% you could do it, see how things work out, for sure. And the same with the meetings. The chair had mentioned, you know, we're going to be more efficient also at not necessarily just meeting every month, because that's what we do, is do we have items that have, you know, necessitate us meeting so that we preserve everybody's time.
I look at the logic, you know, to your point, Keith, I think you make a good point that, you know, the community, you know, so whether we're separate or whether we're a breakfast or lunch or however it is, I mean, so, you know, the community has to show up to, you know, all these, or they just show up to one and then their message is going to get passed on. It's confusing.
Chair, you do have members of the public when you'd like to hear them.
This is Steve Weiss. I have one more comment. I don't understand the confusion here. At the end of the day, the Board of Supervisors makes the decision. We're an advisory body. The authorities give their input. We're making this more confusing than it is. I mean, in some cases, over my years on this body, we've negated certain actions, and at other times where we were opposed to something, we were overruled, but we can only do what we feel is in the best interest of the county. That's what we're here for. Not what we feel is the best interest for ourselves, but what's in the best interest of the folks that live in this county. It's important to remember.
Absolutely, but we also have to be, conscientious to the effectiveness of government and the numbers of meetings and, so we've got authorities, we got the advisory commission, we got the board of supervisors. How many venues do we hear the same topics in?
Well, we're not eliciting any additional meetings or anything, Matt.
Okay.
I mean, we're just talking about meeting at lunch or in the morning as opposed to in the evening, as I earlier stated. Personally, I think it's great, but if this was to streamline things, but the way this has been addressed in an effort to broaden public outreach and transparency for the Department of Airports and County, I think we're reducing transparency to have this meeting in the morning or at lunchtime for the general public. That's where I'm coming from. But personally, on a personal note, I hope we go along with this so that I don't have to be up at.
And I will add, and I hear you, but I do think there's value in having 10 people whose sole government job is to be on this commission. And Matt, your supervisor, Matt Johnston, is not on the airport authority. And so he may want to hear from you. And we're out in the community, all of us are, we have our networks, we have people we talk to, and I think we bring that input into this body in a way that's unique to this body, because again, we have 10 individuals from throughout the county, different life experiences, different work experiences with one focus. How do we follow the bylaws and our direction with respect to our two airports? And I think that has value.
Well, we have authorities looking over each airport respectively, and with focus on Oxnard and focus on Camarillo. So I think no matter when we meet, and Steve, I would support the same kind of thing. Meeting here at night, Steve Weiss, versus the same day lunch or. Anyway, I hear where everyone's coming from. I see the same agenda items, and I just see a lot of duplication. Sorry.
This is Bob Trimber, and I think we should go to public comment before we continue our discussion on this topic.
I think that would be fine. I'm looking at the time and wanting to be respectful, and we still have a few more things to do. So,
Okay, we can go ahead and promote Mr. Ben D. Benedetto, followed by Thomas McAnally. Mr. D. Benedetto, please unmute, share your screen if you'd like, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I promoted Barb first.
Okay, all right, my apologies. Ms. Filkins, please unmute, share your screen if you'd like. You'll have 3 minutes.
I may be a bit, okay, I'm here. I may be a bit of an orthodox heretic on this. Anyway, the bottom line is I've been involved in organizations that have dealt with advisories and some level of decision-making like authority. And I think there needs to be another dimension here. It may be a point to look at redoing what the advisory is, because I think there's a whole dynamic that's being missed by the fact we're constrained by certain governmental processes, Brown Act, and that type of thing. If there can be a relationship between an advisory commission that truly represents the community, and by that, I mean, there are going to be some pretty high-spirited discussions between Oxnard Shores and people at Oxnard Airport, Camarillo, whatever. And then that information, that decision-making resolution, if you will, gets passed to the authority. There might be a more dynamic relationship that is more community outreach, community involvement. It's just a thought, but it would take redoing the bylaws of the advisory and how the advisory meets and its relationship to the authority. And I'll just lay that out there. I've had that discussion with healthcare agencies, national, federal, state, and local levels. So just a thought for discussion.
Thank you. Other comments?
We'll next hear from Ben D. Benedetto, followed by Thomas McAnally, and followed by Walter Hagedorn. Mr. D. Benedetto, you can unmute, share your screen if you'd like, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Ms. Filkins has it exactly right. If you look at the bylaws for the authority and you look at the bylaws for the advisory, you will see that under the Article 5 for purpose of the bylaws for the advisory, the commission from time to time may seek and receive information from airport users, lessees, the general public, and agencies of the federal, state, and local government on county airport operational administrative matters and on aeronautical concerns in general for the purpose of formulating recommendations to the board. In other words, look at your agenda, take what the airport has to say and involve the community, deal with the neighborhood councils when people have something to say, or there's an area like lead potential poisoning that we've been trying to get you guys to listen to, then you have the opportunity to investigate that before you move it forward. If you look at the purpose for the airport authority, under Article 2, purpose, the purpose of the authority is to consider and recommend to the Oxnard City Council and the Ventura Board of Supervisors appropriate standards for operations at the airport, Oxnard Airport, and development around the Oxnard Airport so that operations and developments are compatible with each other. Nothing about involvement of the community. That board is relying on your advisory board to deal with the community in relationship to the airport's needs, desires, and the safe and sane community operation of the airport. So the agendas would be different if the actual authority did that. I don't think they've ever done it. I'm not blaming any person on this committee for it. I don't think it's ever been run the way that it should be run. Now, both the commission and the authority are operated under the Brown Act. So they both have to have public comment under the Brown Act. But you have a number of issues of trying to put these two meetings on the same day, aside from they have different mission statements in order to operate properly. And that issue is when one agenda item goes from the advisory to the authority can't act on that unless it's been posted according to the Brown Act in the required locations for the required period of time. That's not gonna happen. You're gonna be in continual violation of the Brown Act. So you need some separation between the two meetings. You need the advisory authority to be dealing with the community when an item requires it. Not all items require it. And then make recommendations under a different agenda with the airport's requirements, recommendations, the public's, and the airport staff reports. Another thing, you can't just try it and see how it works because you'd have to change the bylaws. And Ms. Filkins brought that up as well. So the authority or the advisory has not been operating within the confines of what it was set up to do. So when
your time is up, Mr. D. Benedetto. Thank you.
We'll next hear from Thomas McAnally, followed by Walter Hagedorn. Mr. McAnally, once you receive your promotion, please unmute, share your screen if you'd like, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Any further comments?
Yes, I do see Mr. McAnally with us. I believe he just unmuted.
I just have succeeded in getting online. Thank you. I think you should stick to the agenda as stated and resolve whether or not you're going to move it to the daytime. So my comments are focused primarily at that. It's a question between those of us who are retired. We would love to have it in the day. And those that work for a living where it necessitates it be at night. And the airport commission is going to have a lot of things that's going to come up where you're going to want input from the people that live around the airport that have families and work for a living. So I'd say keep it at night, get that resolved today. Second comment, second area, combining the meetings. I would suggest that whoever really wants to combine the meetings, put together a straw man and tell us how it would work. But for now, I hear comments from people that I trust that say it's two different deals and it should remain separate. So I support their guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Any other questions, comments from the public?
Yes, we have promoted Walter Hagedorn.
Good evening again. Walter Hagedorn, Oxnard Shores Neighborhood Council Chair. First, I just want to say I agree with some of the people who have spoken about keeping it in the evening. I do think a lot of people work, and that would make a lot of sense. I also agree with Ben in the sense that these should be two different, and Barb also, two different entities. I've always looked at the commission as it should be an oversight. And when you look at the problems we've had with development and lead and the noise and everything else, some of these things could have been avoided if this had been looked at as different than the authority. So I think that some of the things that were brought up tonight were really positive. I think this is something that the commission should look at as to being more you're dealing with the neighbor councils and everything else. I mean, we fight it out down here and we don't have all the answers, but you know what, if we have some people who are talking to us, I think we can work some of these things out, and I think then take them on to the authority. That would make a lot of sense. But I think that the role of oversight for this commission is what and public involvement, and then reporting those out to the authority. I think that would be a good way to go. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hagedorn. Any other comments from the public?
Yes, we did receive 3 written comments. I can read those now. The first comment is from Joni Conterno. It reads, "This recommended agenda item should not move forward or be approved. It would do the opposite of what it claims to, quote, broaden public outreach and transparency, unquote. Having the 2 meetings on the same day removes the due diligence of the advisory committee to advocate positions on behalf of the community. There would be no time for the public to process information and provide qualified responses between what is advised and what is approved. A great portion of the community that is affected by the airport are hardworking members of the community. Having these meetings before 5 p.m. would reduce the opportunity of those of us that work 9 to 5 and support our community. These meetings must follow their bylaws and the Brown Act and should remain after 5 p.m. and 1 week apart. The 2 to 4 hours of airport payroll that would be saved in the proposed consolidation of these meetings is trivial to the negative impact this proposed change would make overall." Thank you. And a comment from Joni Conterno. The next comment is from Joe Gosland. It reads, "Good evening. My name is Joe Gosland, and I am opposed to the recommendation of moving the advisory commission from nighttime to morning or lunchtime. Moving the day and time would eliminate an untold number of citizens from attending due to work constraints. These meetings should remain on a separate day from the authorities meeting and should be held after 5 p.m. Moving the meeting from the evening would actually do the opposite of broadening public outreach and transparency. The commission needs to hear and digest the public's concerns and viewpoints before making any recommendations to the authority." Thank you. End of comment from Joe Gosselin. The next comment is from Susan Tatum. It reads, "The suggestion that this recommendation is being made in an effort to, quote, broaden public outreach and transparency, unquote, is an insult to the intelligence of the community. In what alternative universe do you broaden public outreach and transparency by restricting the public's opportunity to hear and understand what is going on at the airport and to respond to the items that affect our lives? To approve this recommendation is in violation of your promise to improve your relationships with the community. Thank you. End of comment from Susan Tatum. That concludes the written comments that were received, and there are no further hands raised at this time.
Mr. Trimborn, your hand is raised.
Thank you. You know, there's the evening meeting of the airport authorities provides ample opportunity for public comment. So I'm in support of the staff recommendation, but I'd like to make a substitute motion. I think that this should be a 6-month trial period commencing in February or March of this year. So I guess it should be succinct. So commencing in March of this year for a 6-month period, we, try this out. And then at the end of the 6-month period, we revisit the issue and take further public comment to ensure that we're doing our job, so to speak. So I propose a substitute motion that we approve the staff recommendation for a 6-month trial period commencing in March of 2023.
Thank you. Matt Johnston.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, and I actually really appreciate the comments from the community. Those that have served on this commission for a long time, one of the comments said, that possibly the way this advisory is operating, has there always been such an alignment when the authority was established, or were there differences in prior years, and now they've just kind of come more to share the same agenda and have more likeness than there were differences in the past?
Matt Keith, and some of the committee members could answer that, but staff has said that, they've mirrored each other for a long time, more than a decade. And it really goes to, again, all of you, the AAC, the authority members, want as much information as they can get and be a part of and hear that. So it makes sense why that's been the case. I mean, I talked about the history of when they were created and why, so you kind of see how the redundancy could happen. I've had this discussion with Mr. Tannehill. Yes, the verbiage in the bylaws is different, but the language is broad enough to capture everything that we pretty much do. And again, we err on the side of putting more information out as an opportunity for the community to be a part of it and hear what's going on and get feedback. So that's what I have for you, Matt.
Okay, any other comments from the commission? Mr. Trimborn?
Yes, I placed the motion on the table. Just a point of order for Brown Act. It requires a second for further discussion.
I'm aware, and I'm going to be asking for a second for Mr. Trimborn's motion. Is there a second to Mr. Trimborn's motion?
I second. Maggie.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call for the motion, please?
Yes, this will be for Mr. Trimborn's amended motion. Adriana van der Graaf,
Yes.
Maggie Bird,
Yes.
Matthew Johnston,
Just clarification, this is to do a trial period for moving to do a same day meeting?
correct, a 6-month trial period beginning March 2023.
Yes.
Robert Trimborn,
Yes.
Gerald Abramson,
Yes.
Steve Weiss,
Opposed?
Steve Tannehill.
No.
Okay, that motion passes 5-2 with 2 no votes by Commissioners Steve Weiss and Steve Tannehill.
Thank you. Okay. We will now move on to item E, which is selection for the chair and vice chair for calendar year 2023. Normally, for explanation, the vice chair usually moves into the chair position, but the vice chair has left the committee, so we will be selecting both the chair and the vice chair. First of all, is there a nomination for chair of this committee?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Maggie Bird as chair.
Okay. That's great. Maggie, do you want, so we have a lot of new members on this committee, perhaps you want to take a minute or two to tell everyone a little bit about your experience as in aviation and your background in aviation?
Great, thank you. I'd love to. I'll try to keep it kind of short. I have been on this commission for quite a while. I did serve as chair many years ago. It was a little simpler then, but I'm very much into aviation, always have been. I've been an active pilot since 1977. I've got private, commercial, and instrument licenses and designations, hundreds of hours of experience. And I've been the owner of 5 aircraft at all 3 airports, all 3 county airports. And I participated in air shows, fly-ins, both civilian and military, and airports all the way across the country, plus in Europe, a few of them. And I owned businesses at all 3 airports for time to time and have done business with the FAA. So I'm always aware of what's going on, and I have a good sense of what they want. I really have good rapport with them, I think. And I've also have a lot of experience as a Coast Guard Auxiliary Research and Rescue pilot. And I've been on the crew and the pilot command. So I've had a lot of advanced pilot training through this. And my whole life has been revolving around, or somewhat around, aviation issues, airport issues, and I fully understand them, have seen them change, and I've participated in it as much as I can.
Thank you, Maggie. Are there any other nominations for chair for 2023?
Adriana, I am interested in taking that position as well, so I guess I will nominate myself, if that's okay.
You can. Okay, so we have Maggie Bird and Steve Tannehill. Are there any other nominations? Okay.
Adriana, will you afford me the same opportunity to express my background?
Certainly.
Thank you very much.
My apologies, Mr. Tannehill. Go right ahead.
No worries. So I've been on this commission now for almost 2 years, and I would just mention that being chair is a process job, not a policy job. It's really not about any positions on any issue that comes before the commission. Indeed, oftentimes the chair is the last to speak. It's really about running the meetings and being mindful of the Brown Act, incorporating public comment, being mindful of the bylaws, being mindful of Robert's Rules of Orders. And I would just say, having been on this commission for almost 2 years, I feel I'm fully up to speed and haven't had the chance to be in a leadership role yet. And my other background includes 12 years as a publicly elected school board member, which oversaw a significant budget subject to the Brown Act, subject to Robert's Rules of Orders, and I was president of that board on 3 different occasions. So I have the experience in my background, and again, my interest is strictly procedural, is getting these meetings to run well, smoothly, get the public comment in at the appropriate time, give the commissioners opportunities to speak, be mindful of Robert's Rules of Order, be mindful of what our bylaws say we are to do, and be respectful of the Brown Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members who are interested in the position as chair? Okay, since we have two members who have been nominated, what I'd like to do at this point is to have a roll call, and each member can indicate who they would like to vote for chair for next year. Could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Vondergraff.
Maggie Bird.
Maggie Bird.
I think I'll vote for Maggie.
Okay. Matthew Johnston. Matt, are you?
You're on mute, Matt.
I'm trying to unmute. I'll vote for Maggie Bird.
Thank you. Robert Trimborn.
Maggie Bird.
Gerald Abramson.
Maggie Bird.
Steve Weiss.
Maggie Bird.
And Steve Tannehill.
Well, in order to make this unanimous, let me also say I will vote for Maggie Bird as well, and welcome Maggie as the chair for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay,
very much, everybody.
thank you. We will go on to choose a vice chair for next year.
So,
And again,
Commissioner, Chair Adriano, this is Steve Weiss. For Steve Tannenhill and some of our newer members' benefit, what we've always tried to do, and Chair
maybe
Vandergraff
I could finish what I was saying, and then we could move on to that, Mr. Weiss.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, we have also chosen a chair for next year. And at this point, the vice chair for next year will rotate to become the chair for 2024. So at this point, since Maggie is now chair, Maggie, would you like to take it from this point?
Yeah, as soon as I unmute. I'm sorry, I got a lot of background noise here. I hope it's not bothering anybody. Yes, I'll be happy to take this, and I'd like to open the nominations for vice chair for this coming year, who will move into the chair position.
But Maggie, this is Steve Weiss. I just wanted to make a couple comments here of the way this body has acted in the past, and that is that what we tried to do was take those members of this body who haven't served and put them in a position as vice chair and then subsequently chair. And we still have members that are senior to Mr. Tannenhill that have yet to serve. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. With that being said, then, are there any nominations from the floor?
I would like to nominate Mr. Trimborn for vice chair.
Okay, any other nominations? Well, that's pretty easy. Would you accept that, Mr. Trimborn?
Yes, I'll accept it.
Thank you. Then I guess the matter's closed. And thank you, everyone, for your confidence. We will make a good team for you. And what's next on the agenda? I don't have it in front of me. Oops, there we go.
Madam Chair, it is the director's report.
Thank you. Mhm.
Mr. Weiss, do you beat me up now or do we wait till later? Do I run through these and then you?
I'll wait till later.
All right, fair enough. All right, so you in the package, you do have our revised monthly noise reports. So this was the input that was provided by the subcommittee. And then with our new VNOMS system, using the information that they have. So that's what you see in the packet. We're open to obviously massaging these and developing these as we go, but that's some of the new information that we have in our packets. We expect them as we learn the system and fully understand their capabilities. We're even working with our consultant to expand those, but we're looking for that input as we go through. Update with meeting with the flight schools. As we mentioned many times, we've identified 36 flight schools in the LA Basin region that use our 2 airports. Jeanette and I are working through meeting with those groups. We're up to, I think we've got 15 flight schools we've met face to face at this point, and continue. The holidays obviously made it difficult for us to make contact with some of the schools, but we're continuing to move through those and getting them our fly-friendly information, our pilot guides, our packets, and then just having a candid conversation with them about our 2 airports and what we're looking for them to help us do. That's on the finance side, for those that use our 2 airports, we are looking to allow online payments. Our accounting team have been working almost a year to get through this, get all the approvals through the county system, the outside vendors and all that. We're looking to have that opportunity and be accessible for our tenants the second quarter of 2023. New technology updates. I've been talking about this a bit. Our partnership with the University of Alaska Fairbanks and the Pan Pacific UAS test drone site went into effect December 1st. We have multiple companies, Skyrise, Ampere, new companies like Jaunt Air Mobility, FathomWorks over Port Hueneme, and Swarm Aero. All of these entities are looking at our 2 airports and considering either they're here already and want to expand or looking to locate here. So we're continuing to work at that. And the nice part about that, brings jobs and businesses to our 2 airports, but the new technology is also user-friendly with our neighbors. Most of it is electric motors and things like that, environmentally friendly, quiet with the environment. Still working on the unleaded fuel issue. It looks like the closest right now is our FBO Golden West at Oxnard. They're hoping by the end of this month to have their first load of unleaded fuel available for sale at Oxnard Airport. We are, as I think I did mention before, we will also recommend in the upcoming rates and fees to our Board of Supervisors that we waive our per gallon fee at least for the first year, if not the first 2 years, for those entities that sell unleaded fuel at the airports as an incentive for them to bring it. We all know that the costs can be slightly higher, so we're looking to help do our part. The long awaited private hangar ground leases, we've finished all of that, and now it's the final part, which is inspection and changing over from the month-to-month to the new long-term leases. We've had 3 rounds of hangar inspections. We've got 220 tenants to get through, and we're through about the first 15-20% at this point, and our target is to get through all of them by June of this year. Security camera system, both airports, the equipment is on board. We were hoping to have that working on by the end of the year. It actually will be construction. Installation is starting this month, and between the installation, both airports, and then testing phase, we expect it up and running about the second quarter of this year. Cloud9, I think we've got some updated photos of the construction Cloud9 project. It is progressing. They got the roof on before the weather started, so they continue to make progress. They're still looking for the second quarter opening at this point. Oxnard taxiway connector reconstruction. We were hoping to start this week with that. The weather, as you can guess, has delayed that. And the forecast for the contractor, they actually requested that it be pushed till April 3rd. They expect wet weather all the way through March at this point. So we've notified our tenants, putting the information out that it's being pushed a bit. Still with an April, I think it's a 90 to 120 day project. So we'll just push it to a start date of April 3rd at this point. And the last item, a couple items I want to talk about is it was mentioned a few times, the Oxnard Day of Discovery. One of the first things that I identified when I first came was we need to do a better job of connecting our two airports to the community. Obviously, the pilots and the business at the airport, they understand the value of the airports, but the community itself. And Barb, I want to say Barb Filkins took that to heart. She did a lot of work and pulling a whole bunch of people together. And I do want to recognize some of those, but we have some photos and a little video. Maybe we'll start with the video if we can, Dave. So I can talk as we go through this, but December 10th, did a young, I guess we're not going to have sound. So did a Young Eagles event. They flew 41 kids at Oxnard Airport, had a static display, had folks with the EAA 1469, EAA 723, the Ventura County 99s, the commemorative Air Force folks, CAU, Aspen helicopters, the tower at Oxnard, all participated in helping make this event. Great connection with the community, and want to thank them for that and doing more of that in the future. So we did a little video that we sent out, kind of showing all the work and the good times that they had December 10th. And the last item I want to talk about as we go through this video, finish it up. I'm going to go all the way through the whole thing, but they had helicopters, drones, everything.
Yeah, Keith, if I may interrupt you with this for a minute.
Sure.
I think it's great. I love the idea of starting them early. And somebody did that to me, and I have avgas instead of blood. And I think if we catch them early enough, we'll get a whole lot more, a group of pilots coming in.
Well, and I want to say that, this was just the start. Now it's,
Right.
this event put us in connection with a whole bunch of the Oxnard school district folks. The teachers now want to do tours at the airport. It's something I did in Contra Costa County. So it's something Jeanette and I have been talking about, putting something together so that local schools can bring kids to the airports as well. So Dave, enough of that video. We can move on just to the last item that I had, which was, I heard folks talking about it when we started. We had on our ASIP, our capital improvement project list, a new ARF, aircraft rescue and firefighting vehicle replacement. Typically those new vehicles are $900,000, even though we'll get some grant funding for that. They're still expensive. We were able to pull in some favors from some local airports. Burbank specifically had a surplus vehicle, 2005, that might sound old. but in the aircraft rescue and firefighting vehicle, that is fairly decent and in good shape. We'll probably get at least 10 years out of that and be able to push back if needed in the future, that expensive outlay. So all we had to do was spend the $800 to get it transported down the road, and it's here. We'll do some upgrades to it and updates to it, but it was a nice savings and a nice holiday gift for us. I mentioned a new one, 900,000. If we were on the looking for a refurbished one, same year, probably spend $450,000 for it. So a nice find for us. And that's all I have for the director's report.
Okay, thank you. You have any other reports we want to talk about? I know there were some things in the package, but the package was really big this time.
Receive and file.
Okay, any second on that?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, and on the correspondence, any comments? You're making it easy on me. Okay, commission comments. Is this where you want to come in, Steve Weiss?
Probably redundant on my part, but this kind of weather we're experiencing right now always reminds me and some of you on this commission that how important having our two airports here when we're possibly cut off via roads, or as today, Santa Barbara Airport closed down. So we need to be the viable alternative. And I was disappointed when I hear Commissioner Tannenhill say that those days are over of us having a common carrier operating out of Oxnard Airport. I hope that's not so. When it's determined that it is, you guys can send me out to pasture, because that's going to be a sad day. When I first moved up here, there were 3 carriers and I was traveling a lot, did a lot of business travel, and you literally could make connections from here or go many places within the state directly right out of good old Oxnard Airport. It was wonderful. And as later on, after the restrictions of 911, it was so great to connect here and avoid going through security at LAX. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Steve Tannehill?
Thank you, Chair Maggie, and I look forward to having you as our chair, and congratulations on that. I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job. Just a
Thank you
couple
very
things.
much.
Yeah, of
Mhm.
course. You bet. You bet. First of all, I do want to thank staff and Director Freitas and his team. That ARF truck was a great, well done. You know, we've had this discussion before. I know, you know, the money to buy one, the $1 million that was approved doesn't come out of DOA funds, but it's still public money. We saved $1 million of public money, and we should be proud of that fact. And you should be proud of that fact. And thank you for that. Good news on the leaded fuel. I'm glad to hear that. That was also of interest to me. So I'm glad to hear that's coming, and you're going to work to try to get it into planes. You know, I'll just mention, since it was called out to me, we actually have 3 airports we can rely on in a catastrophic situation, because Point Mugu is also just a few miles down the road, and they have before pitched in to bring in civilian planes when needed. So we actually have 3 airports that we can rely on. As far as my comment on the passenger service, I take no delight in that. It's not something that I mean, if you ask me, I wish it would return. I would rather see it. The problem that we've been having with noise is from touch and goes. And I think the reason we have so many touch and goes, and I've been told this by instructors, is because you have a towered airport, you had controlled airspace, and there's nothing else really going on. So they get to come here, work with the tower. If we had passenger service, it would bring value to the community, and it would help with that problem. So, I mean, if I could vote on it, I would vote to bring passenger service back. But I think the business model has changed. Indeed, you may be aware, American Airlines just pulled out of Long Beach. They're not serving Long Beach anymore because there's not enough business for them. And the turboprops that this airport relied on are not being used by the domestics anymore. So I think it's data driven, it's factually driven. This is not an opinion. This is based on the data I've seen. And I think we should look at that at some point. It's been 14 years we've been waiting. I know in the last year and a half, staff has worked hard to try to get somebody interested in coming into Oxnard, but nobody's biting. And indeed, we're seeing consolidation, not expansion. So that's my thought on that. And then I want to mention one other thing that kind of gets talked about. There's actually another county that's exactly our size that does not have an airport. And that's San Francisco. There is no airport in San Francisco County. The people of San Francisco use the airport in San Mateo County. And so our situation here, where we go up to Santa Barbara or over to Burbank or down to LAX for passenger service, is not really, San Franciscans are in the same position. If you live in Russian Hill and you want to catch a plane, you got to go to San Mateo or you got to go to Alameda, and that's what they do. So it's really not unique what we have here. And then my last comment I make, and then I'll shut up, is Maggie, with you taking over, and we're going to have some new commissioners, I think, with the 2 new board of supervisors, I would like us to get together and have a review of our bylaws. You know, those are our governing document. That's the Constitution. That's what we're supposed to operate in accordance with. And I think it would be useful for us to have spend 30 minutes and walk through the bylaws and what we're expected to do. And I think, given the discussion tonight about how are we different from the airport authority, I think if we look at the bylaws, that'll illuminate that conversation and help us understand the job that we're supposed to do and how we can optimally do it in the year to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I agree with that on the bylaws, and I believe that they're available to anybody that wants to see them. And they were somewhat recently, within the last few years, completely revised. And I know it was a committee that worked, Adriana was on it. That committee worked for months and months getting the thing through.
That
So
is
it's
correct,
all-
Maggie.
Yeah, it's all somewhat up to date as far as I know. And the other thing, Steve, don't mean to criticize you, but you forgot another airport that we have in the county. Santa Paula is a great general aviation airport.
Thank you,
And it's
Maggie.
very-
We have 4 airports in our county that we
Right,
can
well-
turn to in a disaster scenario. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. And Bob Trimborn, you want your
Yeah,
hand
just real
raised?
briefly,
Mhm.
we have it's been 4 months since we had the Wings Over Camarillo Air Show. And just a quick update. So we set all attendance records for last year. We had over 10,000 people per day. And we also generated considerable amount of revenue. And just last month, the Camarillo Wings Association distributed over $130,000 to local nonprofits to help us out during the air show.
Congratulations, that's
So
great.
it's more than just an air show. It supports the overall community of Ventura County and the cities around the airport. So we look forward to a bigger and better show for next year. The big issue that we're gonna have to deal with, that we are dealing with, and that's the automobile parking for the event. So that's all I have. Thank you.
And that was a very nice thing to say. Thank you. Okay, anybody else have anything to contribute? If not, we can adjourn and get some sleep. the next meeting will be Monday, February 6th. So do I need a motion to adjourn?
Nope.
No.
All right, bye. Thank you, everybody.
You.
Thanks. Stay dry.
Yeah, good point.